Alright guys, what's up? Like I said, I was going to show you guys how to set up a basic podcast session. This would be as an example of where it would be one person doing a podcast. So if I wanted to run my own podcast just from my little studio setup, then this is how I would do it. And this could apply to multiple people, but I want to show you one person so that you can then apply it across the board. So first thing we're going to need is a basic rundown of the gear that I'm going to be using. So I have a little microphone over here. Basic Shure SM58 microphone. Nothing very special about it. On a stand. And the one thing that I should mention is that for podcasts, it's an extremely imperative idea, or it's an extremely imperative point that you want to have a windscreen, because especially in podcasts, people, speak with a lot of plosives. They do the buh sounds, and that pushes out a lot of air. And if I was to do that with my microphone right here, you get a lot of that sound, and it's a lot of clipping and air sounds that you really just don't need, right? So this helps to alleviate that. Boom! Just slide it on right there. See how it reduces it so much? Right? Very basic windscreen right here. So I've got my Shure 58 microphone. I got a pretty bad cable, unfortunately, but I hope this will last the whole time. And this is going into my Apollo. I'm sure I can just do this and show you guys. This is my Apollo 8P. So it has 8 preamps in it. Remember, every microphone needs a preamplifier, because the preamp is what takes the microphone from microphone level, which is around -60, to line level, which is about -10 to +4, especially in Pro Studio setups, right? So that's my setup here. And the cool thing about the Apollo is that it has a little interface on the screen. So what you're looking at now is the graphical user interface of the Apollo system. So right off the bat, you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 preamps. As I mentioned, this has 8 preamps. Don't worry about any of the ADATs or the returns or anything. We're not going to use any of that in podcast production. This is just a video for a basic podcast production and the way I would do it if I was setting it up at home. So first things first is this microphone is going into input 1, which is over here. And right here we have the gain knob. So as I turn that up, you should be able to hear my voice through this microphone. Now me personally, I prefer playing with actual knobs. So boom, 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 boom. Check, check, check. Here we go. All right. So one thing that I should mention is in podcasts, it's very common for the people to want to move their microphones, and you use other stands for podcasts, but since I don't have any of those, I'll use one of these. So don't tighten these things too much, but don't loosen them to the point where they're falling all the time, okay? And most people who run podcasts know how to operate a mic stand, so it's not even going to be that big a deal. Okay, so we do have some levels going on here. Test, test, test. That's pretty good. But you see, podcast people go crazy, man. They just start shouting. They don't want to know anything about clipping or preamp or anything like that. So they'll go crazy, and it's your job as the engineer to control as much of that as possible. And whenever you're recording any kind of vocal performance, whether it's a singer, whether it's a podcast, please use a compressor. A compressor is going to control these dynamics. So let's open up the UAD compressor. This UAD has a software that's already built into it, pretty good software as well. And it's going to allow us to record my voice through the digital processor in real time. So it's not exactly like a plugin. It's like a plugin, but it acts on the signal going to the DAW. So if you just want to get a basic example of the signal flow here, it's the microphone to the Apollo, and then the Apollo, this signal runs down this channel right here, and that will eventually go into my Pro Tools DAW over here, okay? So before we get into Pro Tools, we need to set the signal for the Apollo. Like I said, it's pretty good, but oh my God, if we start coughing and doing that shit, it'll be bad. So I'm going to actually dial this down 2 notches. Nah, 1 notch is enough. And then I'm going to open up a compressor. Let's just go with a... Let's go with... Let's go with this one right here. Let's just set a fast attack and release. Test, test, test. Oh, yeah. You see how I'm shouting and it's still pretty controlled? Well, this is what an engineer does for a podcast. Ha ha! Okay. All right. I'm doing this all to show you what happens in a real podcast. All right. So now we got our levels pretty much where we want them. The cool thing about the UAD, like I mentioned, it allows you to print this compression onto the actual DAW that you're working on, in this case, Pro Tools. If you don't want to print onto it, you can switch to UAD Monitor, but I'm going to switch to UAD Record because I want to record the compression into my DAW. All right. Okay. Next, let's go to our DAW. First thing we have to do is check the playback engine, make sure we are on the Universal Audio Thunderbolt, which is what I'm using right here. Okay, and I've set up a mono audio track, right? And you do that just by Shift Command N, mono audio track. And all I've done is I've routed this mono track to an auxiliary track over here. The reason why I've done that is in case I wanted to create multiple mono tracks, I can send them all to a single mono aux. It's the same reason why we have a bunch of drums going to a drum aux, in that case, a stereo drum aux. And you might be wondering, well, if you're the only one doing a podcast, why would you need multiple mono tracks? And sometimes people do that when they have to read sponsor copies, like this episode sponsored by, and they'll do it on a separate track and drag it in whenever they want those sponsor breaks. So that's why I have them. Okay. And let's go ahead and mute this. So what I'm listening to right now through my speakers is the monitor audio from the Apollo directly from the microphone to the speakers. Okay. If I was to record enable track in Pro Tools, we would hear dual monitoring. See? Now you can hear my voice is kind of funny, right? And that's because I'm listening to two audio tracks, or not tracks. I'm listening to 2 instances of my voice. One after the Apollo and one after Pro Tools. So if you, again, imagine the microphone thing. Microphone goes to Apollo, goes to the DAW. So what I'm hearing now is the microphone after the Apollo and the microphone after the DAW. I don't want to hear both of those. I just need to hear one of them, and preferably the one that has the least latency. The least latency one is the one that comes after the Apollo. So I'm going to mute my DAW. So now I can just hear my voice. All clean. Metal Geared. Can't be. Snake! Anybody? No? Okay. All right. It's okay. So now we got everything set up. Why don't we go ahead and I'm going to do a separate video for mixing the audio of a podcast, but let's go ahead and just record some basic audio. All right. Welcome to the Jeet Suresh Paul show, where we talk about a lot of bullshit, and hopefully you guys find me entertaining enough to stick around. This is a podcast test and blah, 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 blah. So I guess while this is recording, one thing that I could say is that different podcasts have different methods of going about how to record things in terms of mic position, because we didn't really talk about mic position. I like it when they're about, a little closer than a fist away, depending on the microphone. This microphone is not very sensitive, so about this distance is good. What is this, like a thumb? About a thumb is good. Some microphones that are more sensitive, you'd have like a fist distanced in it, and this is what that would sound like. A little more, overall clean. Now, there is something to be said about podcasts and radio stations that go right up and close to the microphone. Welcome to the blah, blah, blah show. And this takes advantage of a concept or what is it? It takes advantage of a principle called proximity effect. Now, proximity effect is an effect that occurs as you go right up against the microphone. All the mid-range, like the lower mid-range, starts to come out, and it makes your voice sound all kinds of deep. So I'm also trying to pitch my voice down, but if I was to just stay right here in my normal speaking voice, this is what the proximity effect does. Whereas if I start to move away, this is what my voice sounds like without the proximity effect. Testing for proximity effect as I go closer and closer and closer. You see how I'm not changing my speaking voice at all. It's literally, as I get super up close to the microphone, it's something about how the air is like trapped in the microphone that causes all the lower mids to come out. I don't know the exact theory behind it, but it's called the proximity effect. So if you want to check that up, go ahead and do that, motherfucker. All right, let's go ahead and do this. And you know what? Why don't we record some sponsors here? So let's go ahead and duplicate this track. I don't want the blah. Here we go. And we'll call this sponsor. Oh, we usually call it bumpers, but all right. Sorry. It's 2 M's. Bumpers. All right, same thing. Mute the track. And we can go. This episode is sponsored by SAE. SAE, learn your audio shit, motherfucker. Yo, if I get sued, that'd be the funniest thing in the world. All right. So you'd have basically a start of a podcast going like this. There we go. This episode is sponsored by SAE. SAE, learn your audio shit, motherfucker. All right, welcome to the Jeet Suresh Paul show. Right, so that's just, we're not done yet. I'm going to take this into a Pro Tools session later today, and I'll do another video on how we would go about mixing things, music and shit. But this is a basic way of setting up a podcast. Pretty simple, right? So let me get this mic out of the way. Bye, microphone. All right, so hopefully that all made sense, right? Pretty basic. The reason why I'm teaching you guys a podcast as like the first thing is because these are super easy to do. They utilize basic principles of which microphone you're using, windscreen, proximity effect, preamp, DAW, and it's just basic recording. There's really nothing to it. The only thing you do have to make sure is that you get a clean signal, very important, and you're using a compressor. Again, highly, highly, highly important that you use a compressor just to control the dynamics, because a lot of podcasts go wild, especially some of those podcasts out there, they go crazy. So I'm teaching you this because podcasts are easy. They're a great way to break into the studio scene or like an industry scene or anything. They're really easy to do, and you can actually start making money from them pretty fast if you find the right podcast. So yeah, hopefully that all made sense. I just want to make sure I guess that's it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this session and we're going to eventually mix it.